Have you ever felt a connection with someone you shouldn't? A forbidden attraction that takes you by surprise? That's exactly what happened to Michael when his nephew walked in on a moment he thought was private. What followed was a summer of secret desires and unexpected intimacy. Get ready for a story that explores the complexities of attraction and the risks we take for love. I thought I was alone, lost in a private moment I never expected to share. But then the door creaked open and there he was, my nephew Ethan, staring at me. His eyes said more than words ever could, and what followed was something I never saw coming. I wasn't his uncle by blood, just a close family friend. He had always been close with me, a little older than the others around him. I had a quiet charisma that made me seem larger than life. There was something about me that drew people in, that made them hang on to every word I said, and Ethan, perhaps more than anyone, was drawn into my orbit. Captivated by the charm, I exuded like an invisible pull. It was during one of those lazy summer nights that everything changed. Ethan caught me in a moment I never thought he would see. What happened next left us both reeling, unsure of what to say or do. One evening, he found me lounging on the back porch, playing with an object that I was trying on myself. I'd picked it up to pass the time and satisfy myself. He sat down next to me, looking thoughtful as I hid what was in my hand. "Are you hiding something?" he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "No, there's just not much to do around here." He chuckled, a sound that felt warm and inviting. "Well, maybe you're looking in the wrong places." He leaned closer and his voice dropped. "I've got something in mind, something that'll shake things up, but it's not for everyone, only someone I can trust." I felt a thrill shoot through me, excitement mixed with curiosity. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was starting to pound. "I have seen what you were doing. I didn't know we had similar interests," Ethan said. "Similar interests? That's what fascinates you too." I asked, surprised. "Yeah, but we will talk about it later. Let's go inside." And with this, we headed inside the house. The following days felt like a fever dream. Every afternoon, I would wait for Ethan to call or give me some sign that it was time to meet again. But he always kept me guessing. It was as if he knew how much the mystery was driving me crazy, how much I craved the thrill of uncovering another secret. My mind kept racing back to that place. When he finally asked me to join him again, I felt a surge of excitement mixed with something else, something that made my stomach twist with both anticipation and nerves. I told myself it was just curiosity, but deep down, I sensed there was more to it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air felt charged with something I couldn't quite name, a feeling that was both thrilling and unsettling. When we went down to the porch that evening, everything seemed so perfect, so peaceful. The air was still and the atmosphere quiet, like the world had paused just for us. I saw him waiting there, standing calm, yet with an undeniable excitement in his eyes. It was the moment we shared our first kiss. And when he started talking about the tools he had in the shed, something that had always fascinated him, for the first time, I felt like I had found someone who could truly understand me, someone I could open up to. The days that followed were filled with tension, a quiet undercurrent that neither of us spoke of, but both of us felt. We spent hours in the shed talking about the past, about dreams, and about the things we wanted from life. Each conversation peeled back another layer of him. And in turn, I shared parts of myself that I had never spoken about before. There was one night, though, that stood out. The night when the air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken energy. We were sitting on the floor of the shed, surrounded by blueprints and tools, our shoulders almost touching. He was telling me about a road trip he'd taken years ago, a journey that had changed him in ways he still couldn't explain. "I think that's when I realized life doesn't wait for anyone," he said, his voice softer than usual, like he was sharing something personal. "You either take risks or you end up standing still, watching everything pass you by." His words hit me harder than I expected. I felt something stir within me, a longing to understand life the way he did, to take those same risks, to see things with that depth and intensity. It was as if he was showing me a path, inviting me into a world I had only glimpsed in the stories he told. "What kind of risks did you take?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper, unsure of where the conversation was headed. He looked at me, and there was that familiar smile, that smile that always made me feel like we shared some secret, the kind most people wouldn't understand. He said, his gaze steady, the kind that leaves a mark, a memory that stays with you no matter how much time passes. We sat there in silence, the weight of his words hanging between us. My heart raced, a mixture of excitement and nerves leaving me breathless. It was like I was standing on the edge of something vast, something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but felt drawn to anyway. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, like the world was changing and I was at the center of it, right there with him. The connection between us felt stronger now, an unspoken bond that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. It was a silent agreement, a shared understanding that we were on the verge of something that would change us both. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to follow him wherever this path led, no matter the risks. But as the days passed, I could sense a tension building, a feeling that we were approaching a breaking point. It was like a storm gathering on the horizon, a force that neither of us could ignore. Each moment felt charged with a silent intensity, a current that pulled us closer even as it threatened to tear us apart. There was one evening when he seemed distant, lost in thought. I watched him, wondering what was going through his mind, feeling a pang of worry mixed with something else, something that felt dangerously close to longing. He looked at me, his eyes holding a hint of sadness. And for a moment, I thought he was going to say something to break the silence that had grown between us. But he just shook his head as if deciding against it and stood up, gesturing for me to follow him. We walked back to the house in silence, the night air cool against my skin, and I felt a strange sense of anticipation, like we were on the edge of a cliff, waiting for something to pull us over. And then, just as we reached the back porch, I paused, turning to face him. His expression was serious, his eyes searching mine. "Remember what I said about risks?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. I could see it in his eyes, the same nervous anticipation I felt, but he didn't trust himself to speak. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to gauge what was happening between us. His gaze met mine, intense and unflinching, and a shiver ran through me. It was a mix of fear and excitement, the kind of electric tension that you can't ignore. Sometimes the biggest risk is letting yourself feel something you don't understand. I said softly, letting the words hang in the air like an invitation or a challenge. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked into the house, leaving him standing there breathless and unsure of what had just passed between us. The air was thick with tension, an undeniable current that left me reeling. I knew that whatever came next, we were at the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. The days that followed felt charged, like every interaction had a hidden meaning, like we were both dancing around something neither of us could fully grasp. Our silences stretched longer, charged with unsaid words, and I could feel the weight of the unspoken thoughts between us. I caught him repeating my words to himself, his mind clearly trying to decipher what I had meant, wondering if he felt the same pull I felt. One late afternoon, he suggested we go for a drive, beyond the familiar paths and toward the hills. I didn't ask questions, I simply agreed, my pulse quickening with a mix of excitement and nerves. As we drove, the world outside blurred, the scenery slipping by as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that seemed to follow us along the road. The silence between us was comfortable, but it felt strained in a way I couldn't ignore. We were both waiting for something, I think, but neither of us dared to speak it out loud. Eventually, I pulled off the main road and onto a narrow, hidden path that led to a secluded overlook. It was a place I'd come to over the years, a spot untouched by the world, a secret that felt like it belonged to no one but me. We stepped out of the car, the cool evening air brushing against my skin, and for a moment we just stood there, taking in the view. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. And in that moment, it felt like everything around us had faded away. It was just us, this strange, thrilling, and terrifying thing between us. I glanced at him, and there it was again, A flicker of something, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his lips that made my heart skip. I could feel the air between us grow heavier, the tension impossible to ignore. It was as if everything had led up to this moment, and neither of us could hold back anymore. Without thinking, I reached out my hand, brushing against his. He didn't pull away. Instead, he looked down at our hands, a flicker of something passing across his face, something unreadable. I could feel the warmth of his skin, and it grounded me in a way I didn't expect. My mind was racing, filled with thoughts and questions, but in that moment, I pushed them aside. All that mattered was the way his touch steadied me, connected us in a way that words couldn't explain. I turned to face him fully, my expression unreadable, though I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, we just stood there, the silence stretching between us, charged with possibilities neither of us dared to voice. And then, almost imperceptibly, I leaned closer, my gaze locked on his, searching for any sign that he felt what I was feeling. I held my breath, caught between anticipation and uncertainty. The air between us was thick with something unsaid, something powerful, and I couldn't tell if he would step forward or if we would both pull away. The world seemed to stop just for a moment as we waited. The next moment, everything seemed to slow down. His face inches from mine, his breath warm against my skin. I could feel the weight of the moment, a mix of fear and excitement that left me breathless. And then, without a word, he closed the distance, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was tentative, gentle, as if testing the waters, feeling the boundaries of this new, uncharted territory. The kiss was brief, a fleeting moment that felt both too short and impossibly long, a spark that left me reeling. He pulled back, his expression unreadable, a mix of emotions I couldn't quite place. And for a moment we just looked at each other, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. "I shouldn't have," he started, his voice barely more than a whisper, but I shook my head, cutting him off. "It's okay," I replied, my voice steady though my heart was racing. I wanted it too. He seemed to relax, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. And I felt a surge of relief, a sense that we'd crossed a line, but somehow found ourselves on the same side. The tension that had been building between us for weeks felt like it had finally broken, replaced by something softer, something that felt both new and familiar. We sat there in the fading light, the silence between us now comfortable, our breaths synchronized as we took in the moment. It felt surreal, like we'd slipped into a different world, a place where time didn't exist, where nothing else mattered except this quiet connection that pulsed between us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape, he reached for my hand, his touch gentle but firm, a silent promise that whatever this was, it was real. And in that moment, I knew that this was something I wanted, something I was willing to explore no matter where it led. And yet, despite the uncertainty, I felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet understanding that this was something I wanted to explore, something that felt right even if I couldn't explain it. We'd crossed a line, but instead of feeling lost, I felt like I'd found something real, something that was worth the risk. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and whispered conversations, a quiet exploration of this new connection that had blossomed between us. We were careful, always on edge, but somehow the thrill of it all made it feel even more real, like we were sharing a secret world that no one else could touch. One afternoon, as we sat by the lake watching the sunlight dance on the water, he reached for my hand, his touch gentle but sure. I looked at him, a question in my eyes, and he just smiled, a soft, reassuring smile that made everything feel okay, like this was something we could hold on to, something that could withstand the weight of the world around us. In that moment, I felt a sense of clarity, a quiet certainty that this was something I wanted, something that felt worth fighting for. The fear and uncertainty melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence, a sense that we were in this together, no matter where it led. As I looked at him, I knew that we were standing on the edge of something incredible, a journey that would take us to places we'd never imagined, a story that was just beginning to unfold. The following days felt like living on a tightrope, balanced between excitement and the looming reality of what lay ahead. We spent every free moment together, each day uncovering new layers, little pieces of each other that we'd only started to explore. There was something thrilling about it all, this shared secret, this quiet connection that seemed to deepen with every glance, every touch, every whispered word. Yet with each passing day, the question of where we were headed lingered like a shadow, a weight pressing on the edges of our time together. One evening, he suggested we take a walk, something we often did, but there was a different energy about him that night. The air felt charged, like a storm was brewing, and I sensed that this walk would be unlike the others, that something was waiting for us at the end of it. We left the house and headed down the familiar path toward the lake. The only sound was our footsteps on the gravel, our breath steady yet heavy with anticipation. As we reached the water's edge, he stopped, turning to look out at the lake, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us, and I felt my heart pounding, a mix of fear and hope, knowing that something was about to change. After a moment, he looked at me, his gaze intense, his eyes holding a depth that made my chest ache. "I don't want to lose this," he said quietly, his voice laced with a vulnerability that I'd never heard before. "But I know that it can't last. Not like this." The words hung in the air, raw and painful, and I felt a pang of something I hadn't let myself acknowledge before, a fear of losing him, of this ending before it had truly begun. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, searching for the right words, something to bridge the distance that seemed to be growing between us. "We don't have to know everything right now," I replied, my voice barely more than a whisper. "We can take it one day at a time." He nodded, a small sad smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "But what happens when the days run out? When do we have to face reality?" I looked away, feeling the weight of his words settle over me, pressing down on the fragile hope I'd held on to. It was a question I didn't have an answer for, a truth I wasn't ready to face. But as I looked back at him, seeing the pain in his eyes, I realized that avoiding it wouldn't change anything. That sooner or later we'd have to confront the limits of what we could be. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and honesty. "But I'd rather have this, whatever it is, than regret not trying." He sighed, reaching out to take my hand, his touch warm and steady, grounding me in the moment. We stood there in silence, the weight of our feelings unspoken yet clear, a shared understanding that while we might not have the answers, we had each other, if only for a little while. As the night wore on, we sat by the water, talking about everything and nothing, letting the hours slip by like the gentle waves that lapped at the shore. It was a quiet kind of peace, a calm that felt both comforting and bittersweet, a reminder of the fleeting nature of the time we had together. And as the sky began to lighten, a soft glow on the horizon signaling the approaching dawn, I felt a sense of clarity, a quiet acceptance that while our path might be uncertain, it was worth every risk, every fear. In the days that followed, we fell into a rhythm, an unspoken agreement to live in the present, to cherish each moment as it came, without questioning the future. We spent our afternoons in the shed, working on projects and sharing stories, losing ourselves in the simplicity of our time together. It was as if we'd created our own little world, a place where nothing else mattered, where we could be ourselves, free from the weight of expectations and fears. But even as we held on to this shared world, I could feel the edges beginning to fray, the reality of our lives creeping in, a reminder that this couldn't last forever. There were moments when I'd catch him looking at me, a hint of sadness in his eyes, as if he too felt the inevitable pull of the outside world, the forces that would eventually draw us apart. One afternoon, as we sat in the shed, the quiet ticking of the clock marking the passing time, he turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would happen if things were different?" he asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant, as if he were afraid of the answer. I looked at him, feeling a pang of sadness mixed with hope. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper, but I try not to think about it too much. I rather focus on what we have right here, right now. He nodded, a small, wistful smile playing on his lips. Me too, he replied, his gaze drifting to the window, as if he were searching for something just beyond reach. But it's hard, isn't it? Knowing that no matter how much we want it, there are things we can't change. I reached out, placing my hand over his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his pulse beneath my fingers. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise, a silent acknowledgement that while our time together might be finite, it was real. And that was enough. I felt a sense of peace, a quiet acceptance that while we couldn't control the future, we could choose how we spent the present. And in that moment, I knew that I would always carry this time with me, a memory that would stay with me long after the days had faded, a reminder of a connection that went beyond words, beyond time. The next morning, as we sat on the porch sipping coffee and watching the world come to life, I felt a sense of gratitude, a quiet joy in the simple moments we shared. It was a feeling I'd come to cherish, a reminder of the beauty in the everyday, the magic of being fully present with someone who understood me in ways I hadn't thought possible. But as the day wore on, I could sense a shift, a subtle change in the air, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I looked at him, seeing the same realization in his eyes, a silent understanding that our time together was coming to an end. As the days slipped by, the distance between us grew, a quiet space that neither of us dared to cross, a reminder that while our connection was real, it was bound by the limits of time, a fleeting bond that would eventually fade. But even as we drifted apart, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that while our story might be ending, it would live on in my heart, a memory that would stay with me, a reminder of a love that was both beautiful and bittersweet. And as I watched him walk away, a part of me felt a sense of loss, a quiet ache that lingered in the empty space he'd left behind. But even as the pain settled over me, I felt a sense of gratitude, a quiet joy in the knowledge that I'd had the chance to experience something real, something that had touched my life in ways I couldn't fully explain. In the end, our story became a collection of moments, each one small, but woven together into a memory that would forever linger in my heart. There was no need for grand gestures or explanations. The connection we shared was enough. As I looked out at the horizon, watching the colors fade into dusk, I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that we had embraced something rare and real, even if only for a brief time. Though our paths had diverged, the warmth of that connection remained, a quiet presence that would always remind me of that summer. And that was the story of Michael and Ethan, a summer romance that defied expectations and left a lasting impact. If you were moved by their story, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to LGBT Stories for more emotional and romantic tales just like this one. And let us know in the comments what you thought of Michael and Ethan's journey. We love hearing from you. This script provides a catchy title, an engaging hook, the story with renamed characters, and a call to action, tailored for your YouTube channel, LGBT Stories. Let me know if you need any adjustments or further assistance.